and I look forward to your presentation because your bio experience. Anyway, as I said, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to come and address you on this subject. The issue of European protein dependency is a subject which is very close to my heart. I have been banging on about this subject for many years now, and I'm pleased that it is gaining more prominence. It's long overdue. The first thing I should explain is who I am. So my name is David McNaughton. I'm the Managing Director of Soya UK Ltd. We are an agricultural seed company, so we are seed merchants. We specialise in niche crops, and particularly in protein crops. We do lupins, soya, vetch, triticale, a number of different forage mixtures for livestock farmers to make silage, and also millet for the birdseed trade. We are also involved in genetics, so we represent the plant breeding interests for a number of plant breeders. So we commercialise lupin and soya varieties in a number of third countries. Now, those are third countries within the European Union and also third countries outside the European Union. So as a company, we represent the genetics of a number of breeders in a number of crops, in a number of markets. Within the UK context, we supply most of the lupin and virtually all of the soya seed that is grown in the UK. It may be a surprise to some of you that we have soya beans in the United Kingdom. This year we have an area of around 400 hectares. 2 years ago it was 0. 15 years ago we actually had around 1,500 hectares, but due to the ravages of the Blair House Agreement, soya production in Europe, as I'm sure Matthias has already indicated, soya production in Europe was really almost impossible under the previous oilseeds regime. We were priced out of the market by not having the support, and it only really became possible after the decoupling. It also became possible when we saw a fundamental shift in the price of soya. Okay, EU soya dependency. For many people this is news. I can rest assure you it is not news. We have had, ever since the removal of meat and bone meal and fish meal from the dietary options for ruminants, now that was implemented in January 2001, we have had a pretty consistent dependency on soya meal. Back then, 15 years ago, we were 67% reliant on soya. It accounted for 67% of all the supplementary protein fed in the European Union 15 years ago. This is not a new problem, and we have had virtually the same level of dependency for all this time. What has changed? Oh, by the way, I agree that for 15 years it's been a bad idea and we really need to fix it. You could argue it's astonishing that for 15 years we, as a European Union, have actually not addressed this problem. I'll tell you what has changed in the last 15 years is the cost, cash. So, between 2001 and 2007, a tonne of soya meal in the European Union was roughly €200. We used to grow soya in the UK, and in pounds we used to get about £170 a tonne. So we would spend £100 an acre, sorry I'm in acres now, but bear with me, £100 an acre growing it. we would get a tonne an acre yield, sell that tonne for £175, and for the farmers this margin was not enough, and they'd say, sorry boys, we're not interested in growing this crop, because the margin wasn't there. That was badly compounded by the fact that we used to get £60 an acre less payment because soya was lumped in with oilseed rape as part of the oilseeds regime. That remains a problem. What has changed? The price, because in 2008 the soya market went through the roof. We went from a rough numbers price of £175 a tonne. By the end of 2008, a tonne of soya was worth well in excess of £300. And what's interesting is that since 2008, we have seen the carbohydrate markets go up and down and up and down. Soya has continued an inexorable rise up and up and up. The real terms value of soya, in real terms, soya has doubled in value since 2007. This is the fundamental problem, because our farmers in Europe can't afford to keep paying that kind of money for soya. It's good news for growing soya, bad news if you're a livestock farmer who's buying soya. Oh, sorry for all the numbers. Okay. We have to look at the future. Is this situation going to get any better? Well, this rather wordy slide, I can summarise it for you very simply. The answer is no. It's not going to get any better. The cost of soya, if anything, is going to continue to rise. Soya consumption worldwide is going to keep going up, albeit more slowly. Soya production worldwide has already increased dramatically. Most of the genetic and agronomic improvements that can be made have been made. The Americans, of course, brought in GM technology. We have seen a huge increase in the genetic potential of soya since 2000. Soya varieties are much better today than they were 15 years ago. But we ain't going to get the same proportional increase in yield in soya varieties anyway in the next 15 years. But what will continue over the next 15 years is that increase in consumption. The Chinese market will continue to buy more and more soya. The Chinese are up to 75 million tonnes, 80 million tonnes at the moment. It is far from inconceivable that in the next 5 years the Chinese will start pulling 100 million tonnes off the market. When that happens, the problem we have today with the price of soya disabling European livestock producers through the protein costs, that problem will get much worse. Okay, so soya will increase. This level of dependency on a single protein source is dangerous. We have heard that every speaker today has said the same thing. It's been true for 15 years. This level of dependency is crazy, and it's an imported product. As Matthias has just told us, this product is an imported product. The average dairy farmer in England spends £185 a hectare on bought-in feedstuffs. This is his number one cost. His second highest cost is labour. It's £90 a hectare. In other words, his highest cost is more than double his second highest cost. Why is he spending so much money on this feed? It is not for its energy value, it's not for its mineral value, it's the protein. And protein is the reason why European livestock farmers are not making money right now. Have no illusion. Every dairy farmer in the whole European Union at the moment is not making money. Why? Protein cost. Number one. by a long chalk. How do we fix this problem? Our friend who asked the question up here is absolutely correct. We have to have a multidisciplinary approach. First, I agree, we have to maximise the production of soya within Europe. This can be done without necessarily permitting the use of GMs. The GM varieties, now remember, as a company, we are involved in genetics. We deal with 4 different breeders and we agent these varieties around the world. I can tell you the yield potential difference between a GM and a non-GM soya is currently around 5%. And that has nothing to do with the GM traits within it. The GM traits that are within them actually only confer tolerance to herbicides. We can do the soya within Europe without GMs. We don't need the GM because in actual fact, okay, the GM varieties are a little higher yielding at the moment, but in reality we can do this without necessarily permitting GM. As someone says, to solve our protein problem in Europe, we need GMs. That's nonsense. Absolutely not true. We have the genetics to do it. So, but we must maximise our protein production of soya. We want to maximise the use of lupins because lupins are completely undervalued and underrated. Sorry about the time. We want to maximise the production of peas and beans, and I particularly want to recommend the upgrading of pea and bean protein. You can use the manufacture of pea isolates. It's pretty straightforward. It's relatively low tech. We don't do a lot of it, and I have no idea why. And as our friend here said, we should make use of our foliar protein sources. They are undervalued. Clovers, lucerne, vetches, they have a very important role in helping to cover the base load of protein. And it's about the numbers. We use the foliar proteins to build the base. We use the peas and the beans to take up another band of requirement. And on the top level, we need European soya and European lupin to take up. I've already overrun. I was going to tell you what a marvellous and undervalued crop lupins are. We should grow more of them. I've run out of time. But lupins are fantastic and we should use them a lot more. And I'm sorry, I really have run over. The Blair House Agreement, I think we agree we have to address this question of the inclusion in the oilseeds regime. I know that's not that easy. It would require renegotiation of the gap. I guess through the greening and the increasing in the greening, I would thoroughly endorse that. I would also suggest that we need a reward, as Dr. Gazowski has suggested, recognition of the energy value that we get from nitrogen fixation. It may surprise you to know that the carbon balance from most legume crops is actually better than the carbon balance from the energy, so-called energy crops that we are subsidising right now. Why are we throwing European money at energy crops and not giving any money to leguminous crops? Not since the good old days of... We haven't had decent support for legume crops since 1992. 1992, when we saw the end of the pea and bean processing subsidy, was the last time we actually put any decent support towards legume crops. No wonder we have a protein problem. There's my conclusions. I'm sure you can read them for yourself. Thank you very much. Here's a lovely picture of some lupins. Thank you. I think it's important that we understand why the European Union is importing 25 to 30 million tonnes of soya and soya meal off the world market every year. The brutal truth is that it does account for 60 to 70% of all the supplemental protein that is fed in Europe right now. Now, the hard fact is that if those boats stopped coming here from South and North America, within 3 months, there would hardly be a pig farm or a dairy farm or a chicken farm in the whole of the European Union that could continue to operate. If those boats stopped coming 3 months from now, if they stopped today, 3 months from now, we would be in deep, deep, deep trouble. That's the reality of where we are today. Now, why are we so dependent on it? And why have we been so dependent on it for the last 15, 20 years? As Mr. Flanagan has pointed out, it's the answer to that question lies in amino acid profile. Soya is conspicuously high in sulfur amino acids, and it is sulfur amino acids that make modern livestock work. The modern genetics of a modern chicken, modern pig, modern dairy cow that's on a 10,000 litre lactation calls for a huge amount of lysine and methionine. The limiting amino acid in the production of meat, muscle, is lysine. The limiting amino acid in the production of milk is methionine. Both of those are sulfur amino acids. Both of those are conspicuously high in soya. And that is why, for a lot of our high-yielding, high genetic production livestock, our broiler chickens, and so on, those animals cannot be fed on low-grade protein because they simply do not perform. They will perform, but not in line with the economic expectation of modern farming. So it's a system. It's not an easy system to unpick because the genetics of the animals is intrinsically tied to the grade of fuel that they require. You cannot run a jet engine on diesel. And the metabolism of a modern dairy cow or a modern pig is the equivalent to a metabolic jet engine. They have to run on a certain grade of fuel. Now, soya will provide that fuel. The only other crop that will emulate it, and thank you for my cue, Mr. Flanagan, is lupins, because lupins are high in protein. They have a high protein content in the region of 40%, so they can compete with the protein content of soya. Soya meal is about 44 to 47, depends on what you buy. Lupins are about 40. Peas and beans are roughly 25. That's why lupins can compete. And that's why there are certain grades of livestock that must have that quality. To understand why we're so dependent on this imported soya, it's about the required grade of quality that those animals require. We cannot simply stop feeding them soya and just start chucking peas and beans at them. It wouldn't work. Lupins can do it. It's only in the last 10 to 15 years that the agronomic problems associated with lupins have largely been overcome. To understand, by all rights, lupins should be a huge world crop, same as soya. They aren't. Why? Because it's only maybe in the last 10, 15 years that the real agronomy problems with lupin have been overcome. If I turn to this question of decoupling, recoupling, which is a very interesting idea, I should explain one of the problems with soya in Europe, specifically and historically, was unlucky in 1992. Soya got rolled in with the oilseeds as part of the Blair House Agreement. Matthias will tell you that this is a massive problem and has been a massive problem. It has been a huge problem, and if I just illustrate for you, back in 1993, 1994, I was in the position of saying to a farmer, hey, grow some soya. Mr. Farmer says to me, well, oil seeds get £120 an acre subsidy. Peas and beans get 180 because the peas and beans were in the proteins regime. Soya, unluckily, was lumped in with oil seeds. And that's frankly been accounted for the reason why you couldn't really get soya off the ground here in Europe as a crop until the price went up. It's only really in the last 5, 6, 7 years that soya has become an economic proposition for a European farmer. Before that, it wasn't worth growing. So the question is, what do we do now? How do we fix this crazy dependency 3 months from disaster? Remember what I also said, that situation is only going to get worse. The Chinese will be taking 100 million tonne off the market in the next 5 years. Possibly, probably. We have to realise that we haven't hit the ceiling yet. We're only halfway through this problem. We need to take action right now. And the way to reduce that dependency, I've looked at all sorts of ideas. For me, the most saleable idea to the European public, certainly not, forget about GMs. GMs are a sideshow on this. The real issue is dependency. 30 million tonnes. How do we replace it? We need an integrated proteins policy. Here in Europe, that's what we need, an integrated policy. One that integrates the foliar legumes, the peas and the beans, the lupins and the soya, those 3 main grades, into an integrated policy. Because if we integrate those crops and we do it right, we can reduce our dependency on imported soya. So to answer your question, how do we reduce it? How do we move towards protein independence here in Europe? The answer is an integrated policy. We need the foliar legumes recognised for their contribution. We need the peas and beans recognised for their contribution. And we need the lupins and European-grown soya recognised for their contribution. And the way to do it is to recognise the one thing those 3 have in common. Dr. Gazowski is right. The carbon credit model is the way to go. Because you have to burn 2 litres of natural gas to make 3 kilograms of ammonium nitrate fertiliser. 1 tonne of ammonium nitrate, you have to burn 650 litres of natural gas, hydrocarbon fuel, to make that fertiliser. 1 hectare of soya or lupin will fix 200 kilos a hectare. It's the equivalent of 90 litres of diesel. And that's a better energy balance calculation than any energy crop that we are currently putting European taxpayers' money into today. We're actually supporting the wrong crops. If we want to save the planet and encourage proteins at the same time, let's go to the carbon route. That will give us the integrated policy that we need at the same time, because it will draw those 3 crop groups together under one policy for the first time ever. That's my personal view. Thank you.